Mananasi Zu'us, and thank you everyone for being here. This is the Guam Trademark Commission meeting being held, of course, at Isla Heslaturan Guahan, the public hearing room. So Hafaday and Mananasi Zu'us, thank you for being here today. The Guam Trademark Commission will now be called to order. For the record, in accordance with the Open Government Law, meeting notices were given to all Commission senatorial members, stakeholders, and all main media broadcasting outlets. The first notice was sent out on Tuesday, April 30th, 2019, and the second notice appeared on Thursday, May 2nd, 2019, and again on Saturday, May 4th, 2019. Today is Monday, May 6th, 2019, and the time now is 10:17. We have 5 members present, which represents a quorum. So for item number 2 on the agenda, before we continue, I see that many of you have been busy already with the enrollment form. So it is important that the agency commissioners appoint dependable and knowledgeable alternates, and these alternates must be consistent in their attendance upon your absence, as they will be representing your agency and may vote upon motions that could affect or impact your organization. So kindly complete the enrollment form before you leave today. Alternate representatives by law are applicable to commission members who are from a government agency or department. For introductory purposes, I ask that you introduce yourselves to the commission and the agency or entity or part of the community that you represent. So if I can begin to my left and have us go around.
Mananasi Zu'us, I'm Jackie Babas, and I'm a program coordinator with the Guam Council of the Arts and Humanities Agency, but I'm actually the alternate designee for President Anne Marie Arceo of the Department of Chamorro Affairs.
Hafaday and good morning. My name is Matthew Baza. I'm an industry development specialist at the Guam Economic Development Authority, and I am Miss Melanie Mendiola's designee to the commission.
Could you state one more time, you're a, what type of development specialist are you?
Industry.
Industry,
Yes.
Excellent.
Hafaday, my name is Francis Guerrero, and I am the chairperson for the CAHA board.
Hafaday, I'm Laura Marie Torres Sauder, and the speaker had asked me to represent her as the cultural arts expert.
Gof Malik. So I think we are seeing the importance of the different areas that are being represented, and we'll at a later point go down the list of the other members, and we'll see the importance that everybody is coming to contribute and bring forth something special, their specialized knowledge, their specialized experience, that all together is important in helping us tackle developing a Guam trademark. I am the chair on the Committee on Heritage and the Arts, Parks, Guam Products, Hagåtña Revitalization, Self-Determination, and Regional Affairs. And by law, I am the chair of the Guam Trademark Commission. And I think each of those elements work really well together in bringing them and that oversight to the Trademark Commission. Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes is the vice chair of the committee and will be serving as vice chair of this commission as well. So, Sidus Maasi, everyone, for joining me today. And I bring to your attention We've handed out some documents. We'll look at a couple of them together today. The first one being that containing the composition of the Guam Trademark Commission. So please take notice of the purpose of your seat on the commission. So first, just so that we are all looking at it together and those out in the community understand who is part of this commission. So I, as legislative chairperson, am chair. The director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation or their assigned representative shall also have a seat here and serve as a vice chairperson of the commission. The president of the Department of Chamorro Affairs or her assigned representative. Someone from DCA definitely can offer insight into the uniqueness of the Guam brand and the importance of protecting the aspects of the Chamorro culture and heritage. The general manager of the Guam Visitors Bureau or her assigned representative is also a member of the commission. And again, that bureau is very important in promoting the Guam brand in its entirety, and there are many ways that they will be contributing. The administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority or her assigned representative. So we are very pleased to have a member from DCA and GITA here. We will also be having a member from the Attorney General of Guam's office or their designated legal representative. They will be providing guidance on intellectual property rights relative to the Guam brand and legal opinions as requested. They will also help us navigate understanding how we fit into the national trademark system and the international potential for that, how trademarks are dealt with there and intellectual property rights are dealt with at the international level. We also have the chairperson of the Guam Council of the Arts and Humanities, so Sijus Maasi for being here as well. And then we have a member of Legislatura Majority appointed by the Speaker, a member of Legislatura Minority appointed by the Speaker, so we will have a couple of other senators who will be joining us at other meetings. And then 2 members that are appointed by the Speaker representing organizations or work that they do active in promoting the Chamorro cultural arts on Guam and having that expertise and experience. And the Commission has the potential to include additional public and private sector members to serve on subcommittees in the 4 areas that we'll be looking at today. We can be developing subcommittees in visual arts, performing arts, literary arts, and traditional arts, and demonstrations and exhibitions. Or we can elect from amongst ourselves committee members. So that can be one of the things that over time we can be determining this meeting or the next. So today's meeting is our first meeting comprising of the new commission members. It's actually been a couple of years since the commission last met. There are certain reasons for this, but I think with developments that have been happening, certainly within the Pacific and around the world through UNESCO and elsewhere, that we're seeing some really exciting possibilities. And this is why I'm really excited for us to be getting together at this point in time. We're seeing examples of how the Pacific is, they are submitting heritage into the Intangible Cultural Heritage World Listing through the United Nations. They have the World Intellectual Property Organization that's being very active. They are trying to create a repository in the Pacific for intellectual property owned by cultural groups in the Pacific. So again, there are many exciting things that are happening, and I'm really looking forward to this journey of us each getting more familiar with all of those processes that have been happening. As the chair of the Committee on Heritage and the Arts, Parks, Guam Products, Hagåtña Revitalization, Self-Determination, and Regional Affairs, the committee will be hosting today's and all future meetings of the Commission. All meetings will be held here at the Guam Congress Building. Well, I say that, but I am hoping we have some field trips maybe to get out and see a few products or Guam artists and so forth. The Guam Trademark Commission is required to meet once a month, and regular monthly meetings will be convened at the availability of this public hearing room. Perhaps after September, we may be able to establish a set and routine schedule. So maybe a particular day of the month we can be aiming for that if that works into everybody's schedule well. Today's meeting is mainly informational and for the purpose of enrolling new commission members. We are now on item 3 of the agenda, and we will discuss elements of the Guam trademark enabling legislation. So the other document I want to bring to your attention is the document containing the duties and purpose of the commission that has been provided to you. In the document, it discusses that the Commission shall work collaboratively to create policy, recommendations in defining and developing a Guam trademark law. So in looking at these duties, there's actually quite a bit to keep us busy. So I'm looking forward to a busy couple of years as we work on this all together. We're going to be looking at the Guam trademark, but also intellectual property rights, and hopefully develop policy or at least recommendations and into how this can be developed into an act. And I think another thing that we can be doing that's very important, this ties in with the Commission on Decolonization. They're looking at 3 different statuses, so we can be looking at the landscape for today, what makes sense today, but we might also be thinking about what some of the potentials are for the different political statuses and keeping good communication with the Commission on Decolonization and those task forces. So something for us to be keeping in the back of our mind, I think, as we move forward with all of our goals and objectives. So with this, in section B, we are to be working towards creating a cultural trademark program titled the Guam Cultural Trademark Act. And we're going to be watching a video in a little bit that comes out of the work that's happening right now in New Zealand and has been going on for some time. So that video will get us familiar with some of what the Maori and the New Zealand government are doing. In the enabling legislation, they do refer specifically for us to look at what the Maori Toi Iho program is in New Zealand, and to use that as background information to promote and license our Chamorro cultural arts, those that are manufactured or produced on Guam. The Commission may hire professional legal or technical services to assist and perform studies, roundtables, conduct polls, surveys, or even conferences, to report findings and to present initial guidelines for a Guam cultural trademark program so that the proposal can be presented to the broader community as a concrete, well-considered, and cohesive program. Guidelines should be discussed to include, but not limited to, a lot of the issues. And so we might be thinking amongst ourselves for the next meeting about how we would want to tackle these issues. I'm very excited about them. I find each one of them just full of such potential. So the first is identification of initial types of cultural arts for use of trademark. And if we look at what's been registered within the intangible cultural heritage and a lot of the forward thinking that we have amongst us, we can be thinking of things that are ancestral, such as pottery designs, and other motifs that have been part of the Chamorro cultural panoply. But we can also be thinking through time, through cultural adaptations, how Chamorro recipes have adapted through time. We can be looking at music and other traditions like Canton Samarita. I mean, there's a whole breadth of what we can be looking at there in the arts. For number 2, we're going to look at criteria for lineage of cultural knowledge, qualifying for use of the trademark. 3, we're going to look at criteria for authenticity of works, qualifying for use of the trademark. 4, we'll look at criteria for quality of works, qualifying for use of the trademark. 5, we will look at criteria for cultural content for use, qualifying for use of the trademark. 6, sources, meanings, and intrinsic functions of proposed trademark image. So that one I think will be very powerful, coming up with the image itself. 7, proposed process for certifying artists for use of the trademark. 8, proposed process for certifying arts organizations for use of the trademark. 9, proposed process for certifying vendors for use of the trademark. And 10, proposed terms for use of trademark in advertising, marketing, and sales. Each one of these I think is so important, and we've been seeing even in the Pacific that ancestral, traditional, and other customary property of indigenous communities and Pacific communities at large are being challenged. So you may have heard that there was an issue with, I believe it was American Samoa Samoa and Nike, that Nike actually had produced some athletic leggings, and they had used very specific Samoan chiefly motifs on the leggings. And there was protest, as we can imagine, by Samoa on this and saying that they had no right to use their property in that way. And they protested enough that Nike did pull them back. But, you know, we can see this as an example of how our island cultures are so vulnerable. Those commercial enterprises are out there and they're looking for motifs, they're looking for medicine, they're looking for all kinds of things that they can be commercializing and commodifying. Another example, the first time that I had heard about it was through Disney. And so we were gathered in Palau at the Festival of Pacific Arts, and people were very concerned that Disney was copywriting some of, at least a version of their songs from Hawaii, and it was something that they really wanted to think about. Other people, when I've been in Palau, they've mentioned concern over certain companies using cultural symbols for their benefit, for that company's benefit, that didn't necessarily have anything to do with the Palauan culture. And so there's concern in many areas, I think, of the Pacific, and you probably have each experienced some of that out and about, or even here on Guam, as we've seen cultural symbols being used otherwise, perhaps. So those will definitely be the types of things that we're tackling and thinking about. The Commission shall submit proposed legislation after its study for a new Guam Trademark and Intellectual Property Rights Act and the Guam Cultural Trademark Act to I Legislatura Guahan no later than well, it says 180 calendar days from the date of enactment of this act, but I'd have to look back again at the year, but that's all right. We're at an important point. So much has happened, so much for us to be availing ourselves of, that we can really do some positive things with the information and the experiences that have been going on all around us and within our own community. So, with this, perhaps there are some thoughts that you have, or experiences, or things that you've thought about that you would like to share? Would anybody like to share?
I think for myself, initially, when I first was invited to the committee, I wondered what the difference was in this purpose versus the Guam Product Seal program that still is working through a lot of different issues. But I think there are similarities across the board as well. So I think takes it, now that I'm sitting here, takes it to a broader and bigger perspective. So I think that's important.
Suzuis Masi for sharing that. And in the packet that I've given for us to be reading as we can, you bring up an important point. We actually have been doing work along these lines, and so it's important for us to see what is there and then how we can be tying it all together and then strengthening it in meaningful ways. So we have the Guam Trademark Commission Act, but we also have a section of our Guam Code annotated that's on patents, trademarks, and copyrights. As you mentioned, Chairman, we have the Guam Product Seal. That legislation is being provided. Then we have the Guam Product Seal Task Force Act, so that we understand they are also active and they are also meeting regularly, so we can be seeing what their goals and objectives are. I try to make it to those meetings, and Gita does as well, so I think there's going to be some good overlap there. We have a Guam Incubator Program. We have a Trademark Counterfeiting Act. We have Department of Revenue and Taxation Guam Trademark and Service Mark Registration Application. We have the Department of Revenue and Taxation Trademark and Service Mark Renewal Application. And then we have the last document that we provided for this meeting anyway, the Protecting Intellectual Property, a summary workshop report on August 10th, 2013. And so several of us were there for that. That was provided, before the Festival of Pacific Arts. And that is, I believe, available on Guampedia if anybody wants to look that up as well. So that was a very good point. We have quite a bit that's out there, but it's maybe in fragmentary or specific ways. And as you mentioned, we have the potential to think about this in a more comprehensive way. And especially, I think, adding in elements like indigenous property rights. I think that will take it in some very important directions, the work that we're doing.
I'm just wondering if the Guam Cultural Trademark Act, which we're tasked to recommend, right? Will that supersede the existing legislation related to all these component parts, or will that be an added piece?
That's a very good question, and I think that will end up being dictated by what we end up developing. So it has the potential to, perhaps, especially if we're looking at the issues in a broader sense. Right, so that's a good point. We need to be thinking about how they work with each other, and if indeed some parts will need to be updated in the law and maybe even superseded if we find something that is better able to address the issues.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification for myself. After reading some of this, it looks to me like there are still, to your point, some definitive purposes for some of these other legislations that were passed, i.e. the Guam Product Seal, even the Made in Guam Incubator Program. I think those maybe don't necessarily relate to what we're trying to do here, where we're looking more at indigenous cultural arts specifically and trying to protect that as a trademark. To me, then that becomes heritage and lineage and basically things that are representative of the true Guam culture.
Yes, and again, that's a really good point. When we look at the Guam Trademark Act that we're going to be recommending policy for development, it does have elements also that are just about being able to develop a trademark, like being able to register for a trademark with the U.S. through Guam. So as I see it, or at least as I understand it right now, it's got those twofold elements that we are developing something that can go through the U.S. trademark system, but I think we also have that potential to be working with something more locally, and that is when we get into the indigenous rights and the cultural rights of our community. But we'll be looking at all of that together to continue sorting that out. So I think with that, we're on the part where we can watch the video. So if I can cue the video, I haven't had a chance to watch it, so I'm looking forward to watching it with you as well.
To me, Toi Iho means the very core, the essence of Maori art, where it comes from, its origins, its narrative, its histories, what we call the taikaka. That is the heartwood. That when you carve something, you are carving at the very heart of the principles of tahungatanga, which all our great artists have been imbued with by their people and by the deeds of their forebears.
The Toi Iho Maori-made mark is a registered trademark of authenticity and quality for Maori arts and crafts. Maori artists will use the mark on works they produce. The mark will be used in the form of a label, sticker or swing tag attached to works for sale. The mark has also been designed to authenticate exhibitions and performance of Maori art. Maori artists will need to apply to Te Waka Toi in Creative New Zealand to become licensed users of the mark. The mark is a For Maori by Maori initiative. The mark has been created by Maori artists. Some of the artists involved will now explain why the need for a mark and what it's all about.
Is there a need for a mark? I actually think that within Te Ao Māori, particularly at this time in our arts development and cultural so-called renaissance, there is a very real need, because so much of our imagery, so much of our taonga, so much of our beauty has been pillaged and exploited and replicated for us in places like Taiwan, the Philippines, Korea.
it is important to differentiate between what is Māori made by Māori hand, and what is made by tau iwi, or people from overseas. I think when one goes into a souvenir shop or a shop where one is presented with Māori imagery and Māori symbol, and one wants to buy something that is authentic, something that is from this place. I don't consider kete being made overseas and brought to this country as being authentic taonga. So in that sense, I think that the mark, again, will help provide a guide to the audience in terms of showing or revealing to the audience what is actually authentically Māori and what isn't.
Quality is all important, that we must do this with integrity, that all artists, all craftspeople, all artisans must maintain as high a standard as possible, because that is reflecting what we are as Māori artists, that we must not lower our standards simply to churn out products which will carry a mark, that we must do this with integrity. As Māori people of old always did, that quality in whatever they did was very important.
The quality of your work must be of the highest degree. If it's not, then it'll just fall into the same category as souvenir type work. There is still going to be a market for it, but as an individual, I don't think you'll be too proud of it if it doesn't have quality with it. To be able to finish a piece to exactly how you want the end product, then that is what I would consider quality.
How do you...
It'll give Māori artists that attain the mark some sort of advantage in the marketplace, I think. So it's that whole thing of branding, and the underpinning values are that the mark is authenticates you as a person of Māori descent, and the other aspect is the quality aspect. So once those become locked in, and the public are aware that that's what this mark signifies. So that'll take some time, I think, and it'll be predicated on basically our people supporting it. They need to support it.
What it will do, it will create a whole opportunity for Māori people to become involved in producing work for retail stores. It will create a demand for Māori made. That's what I would see. As a retailer myself, I want to stock Māori made product, and I will be looking for those products out there amongst producers.
I think what the mark will help provide is first it will, because it's actually been judged by peers in the profession, i.e. within the Māori art world, it's going to have the stamp of authenticity. And I suppose along with the stamp of authenticity comes the acknowledgement that the work is of a certain standard. And I would suppose that that standard would be of a high standard. Now, if that's the case, when the mark actually goes out to the marketplace, the audience or the buyer is then able to make judgments based on those two factors. One, that it is authentic, i.e. that it's been produced by a Māori person. And secondly, because it's been judged by peers in the profession that it is of a high standard, would mean that the person's getting very good value for their money. So they're getting two things. One, they're getting a very good artwork, and two, they're getting something that has been made by a Māori hand.
I would love to have something out there that says you can buy genuine Māori art from this particular retailer, or that the mark is something that's being looked for by people, and we will know soon enough, because if people hear about it, they'll be coming in to ask for it. I know from my perspective of looking at buying overseas that when I was in Vancouver, and there's a lot of Northwest art up there, which is fantastic, but in the certain areas of town, there are Northwest art that's been marketed by absolutely everybody. So I had nothing to go by, apart from the fact that everything that they have up there is labelled, and it's signed by, it could be the tiniest pair of earrings, but it's got the artist's name, it's got the medium, and it has all the information I needed. So that's what we have to do, and it's been really lacking in souvenir tourism for the last 50 or 100 years here. So I'd be delighted to be able to have and present the mark in an appropriate way.
This is a wonderful new initiative, and I'm very pleased that it's happening in my lifetime for me to see that happen. Having experienced being with people who were born 1870 or so, and coming now into this century, it is a huge step forward for our people. It is a huge step from what I experienced as a young child or a young woman to the world today. And it is like this mark is going to launch us out there in the international arena, and in a way that we will be equal to such things as the wall mark and any other mark that is internationally recognised. And for Māori people, that's a great step forward for us. Ka nui aku mihi kia te wakatoi mō ngā mahi, mō tēnei mahi. Nō reira tēnā koutou katoa.
The central portion of the mark is the iho, the core of Māori arts, the essence of creation. The iho sits protected in the center of the symbol. The colored multiple spirals represent the creativity, the innovation, and the dynamism of Māori artists. The iho or core is the origin of Māori knowledge and tradition. Emanating from the core are the whakapapa or genealogy lines of past, present, and future generations. The aesthetics of the mark symbol reflect the quality embodied in the works of highly skilled Māori artists. Toi iho, Māori made mark, authenticity, quality.
Okay, very good. So we're back. So with that, I was also, while we were watching the video, looking at some of what we had discussed. And I'd like us to divide amongst ourselves a little bit of initial work. So I think number one, for most of us here, we could be working on that, and we could divide it up in those 4 categories. There are 4 of us representing the arts, if you will, so we could divide it up amongst ourselves to just at least be initially thinking of different cultural arts. So if among ourselves, and then I would have Gita to start looking at 7, 8, and 9, those proposed processes. I think that makes sense because you do have the Guam product seal within Gita, and so you could be looking at some processes for how that is set up and what might be applicable and other programs as well. So I think if we bring back that information, it will give us information to be developing as our baseline and then letting us know where we can go from there. So with the identification of the types of cultural arts, does anybody want to tackle visual arts?
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
The Guam Masters program that is administered by CAHA, I think might be a great start for us to look at, because there are so many recognized masters that did a lot of cultural art already, and all of that has been recognized as part of the heritage and culture as well. So we could literally find art forms just right within that program to start with.
Malik, that's an excellent suggestion. I know that in the Masters, there have already been recognized blacksmithing, Bilimbentuzen, playing, that there are many types of performing arts and other types of arts that maybe we wouldn't think of so readily. And so you're right, that's a very good area to start. So some of that will cover visual arts, performing arts. I'm not sure, do you know, Jackie, yes, literary arts has been covered as well. There are some master storytellers and others. So did anybody want to, let's see, either start by looking at these different categories, or be the one responsible for going through the masters and compiling that list, and maybe dividing it up into those 4 categories for us?
Yeah, maybe CAHA can handle that, right? Because there are a lot of traditional performing arts, but then there are those intangible arts that
Yes.
have not been included. So maybe
Kungen.
I can volunteer to. I would volunteer to work with the Commission, for example, to brainstorm on intangible indigenous art forms that might also be included.
Maulik, like one that I had mentioned earlier, the culinary arts, then we know that there are the traditional arts of healing with the Zoamti and others. So I think that would be an excellent contribution for you working with the Commission to help us understand some of the arts so that we have that broader understanding of the arts that we should be looking at. I think those would be 2 very productive accomplishments, and then being able to hear from Gita, from Matt, on some of the processes that he's coming up with, at least ones that have been working well, maybe with the Guam product seal, and maybe some others that look like they have some potential. I think that would be a good starting point. Excellent.
Can I ask for a clarification? When we talk about cultural, there's indigenous, and then there's Guam residents, productivity, and creativity. The seal would cover the entire range of Guam product that could include non-Chamorro as well as Chamorro, is that correct? Or does it specifically focus on indigenous cultural product?
I can let Matt clarify, but from what I've seen from the Guam products and what I've learned from Gita is that it's the whole range of products as long as they are manufactured here. And that's the key, is about being manufactured here.
And that's for the Guam seal?
That's for the Guam
But for the
product seal.
trademark, since the Maori example is very clearly a Maori mark, right?
Okay,
So
yes.
are we going to create a Guam mark or a Chamorro mark?
I think that's a really good point. From the way that I read all the work that they're having us do when it says cultural knowledge, authenticity of works, and they mentioned cultural content. To me, I read a lot of that as indigenous, but I think we can be looking at the other aspect as well, and whether that needs to be done additionally beyond the Guam product seal about being authentically of Guam somehow.
I mean,
Well,
they could run as concurrent streams. So
Okay.
one set of one mark could be uniquely indigenous, and another mark could be Guam-wide, right? I mean, that certainly is possible.
Exactly. I think that it will be important for us to look at it broadly in that way, that we want to make sure to focus on and have at the core the indigenous culture, but we do have the larger community to bear in mind, and so
Right.
I think looking at that as well is important. And one thing that we'll want to be thinking about as well is chamorros exist around the world. And now this is a Guam trademark, obviously, but just again to be having in the back of our mind how that fits in with the diaspora and what they're producing in Washington State or California State, and even in the Northern Mariana Islands, how these elements all fit together. So we might at some point in time be reaching out and having some good conversations with those groups as well.
And that's why I think it's healthy. We don't want to exclude, but at the same time, we don't want to minimize the importance of also recognizing indigenous contribution, uniquely indigenous contribution. And I think Maoris have taught us, Hawaiians have taught us that can be done within certainly Hawaii within an American system and still be appropriate. Because we're often, apologizing and being accused of being exclusionary when we talk specifically Chamorro. So long as we provide options for both streams, we don't want to exclude creative artists and contributors who seek a trademark, right, from Guam. But at the same time, as you said, with the diaspora and all of that, there can be some unique contributions that are indigenous in nature that tie in more with the UN streams of consciousness about protection and intellectual property.
Right. And that's going to be some of the exciting part of the journey, I think, is having us explore all of those complexities. Yes. Any other points?
Yes. The Guam product seal, although we love it when it's a cultural item being manufactured or something that's Guam related, it's very important to remember that the Guam product seal, at the end of the day, is not really a cultural program overall. It's more of a validation that a product is made in Guam. And there's the 50% value added. And it really, if you look back in recent times, it was really meant with regards to perishable items, because there was a lot of frustration that food items were being brought in not from Guam that said Guam on it or Chamorro, and that's why the seal was reinforced. That's why there's also the labeling aspect of it, that if you're going to use the word Guam or Chamorro, there's certain other labeling requirements that are required if the item is not made in Guam. With regards to this trademark, it would be something that, with no other information, would be layered maybe on top of a Guam product seal. If I'm not mistaken, I know that certain definitions of other types of art have been added recently to Guam law, culinary, literary. So there are already efforts to create new definitions as to what other forms of intangible art may be. How that fits into when it moves beyond the intangible to creating a commodity or a commercial product, that's how that will work with the Guam product seal. How that will work right now, we're not too sure. It is the first meeting, but it's also very important to keep in mind that even if someone who just wanted to make a cup, they could just make a cup and get a Guam product seal because the cup isn't made in Guam. So that's something to look at. I know, for example, I think the Lieutenant Governor's office keeps the actual Guam seal. So if someone wants to put the Guam seal on a product, they would need to get approval first from them to get it. So it may be something similar to that, where if someone wants to say that this is going to be made in Guam and it's going to be a true Chamorro piece of art or souvenir, like they said in the video, that they may be required to get this trademark first prior to the government then saying, oh, you can get a Guam product seal for manufacturing the product in Guam. That may be something that could happen as we move forward through the process. But like I said, Gita, we're not art experts, we're not technically cultural experts, although we may, being exposed to it, we know, but that would be left to the cultural art experts moving forward.
Very good information. So Sizuas Ma'asi for that. And yes, with the listing of the different art forms that are out there, it'd be good to be developing those definitions so that it's very clear. And then for us to be thinking about how to make this as streamlined and accessible a process for people. I know that's one of the issues out there is in dealing with the government, a lot of times people will think about complexities and so forth. Because there are these other programs out there at the Guam Product Seal, we need to be thinking about how they can be working alongside each other and making sense and not overcomplicating the matters for the people who are actually we're trying to serve with this trademark and the product seal.
For that matter, then, I think for that matter, then it also bears consideration the use of the Guam seal, because there's a lot of product out there that is using it just by mere approval of the Lieutenant Governor's office, but I'm not even sure if there's really I'm not familiar with it enough to know if there's really a step or process or requirement involved that could also impact what we're doing here and work in tandem.
It seems to me abundantly clear too that the Guam product seal process is very important from the commercial end, right? And it puts the stamp of approval and creates criteria for who can say something is made on Guam. And that I think is a separate function than the function that we're pursuing, which is the protection of the work of people and the intellectual property rights of people. So if we think of the trademark in that manner, it's distinct. So you're right, we can put it on top of if it warrants, right? If it warrants that, or if there's a trademark criteria that can be applied to the product. But I think that that's very important because a lot of what indigenous cultures are dealing with is really intangible in terms of knowledge protection. And I think that the Samoa example is that genealogical knowledge belongs to a clan or a community of people, and it is a breach of sacredness to use these symbols in an inappropriate or manufactured or commercial way. So those are much stickier issues. Who owns knowledge is a very difficult thing to contend with. And so I think that that's, who would trademark Kantan Samurita, the verses, for example, or a chant. Maybe Taitano can trademark some of the work that they've done that has been considered, authenticated, right? So, but who owns it, right? So these are the things that I think we need to be, and what if I want to use what you've trademarked? Am I able to? Do I pay a retaining fee? I mean, those kinds of things, those are the things that indigenous communities are grappling with. So I think that it's very healthy that we're trying to grapple with these issues ourselves.
Hungen, and so in what I've seen, and there's still so much more to learn, but in what I've seen, some of the approach in the Pacific has been that the cultural group as a larger body is looking to copyright on behalf of the culture some of the larger knowledge, like their particular navigational knowledge and things like that. But you're right, there are different groups within that. Like I've seen for the traditional healers, some of that is, yes, there's overlap, but then some of that is very individually owned by families or with certain passing it on within the family or from one person to the other. So that will definitely create some issues. And then if we're talking about some of that broader knowledge, that's where we need to really look at the diaspora and the Chamorros that are in the CNMI. How does that all fit together? Will we be needing to work as a larger unit to think about those larger intellectual property rights that belong to all Chamorros? Definitely. So I think we're going to have a lot of really good discussions. So, Sijuas Maasi for all of your contributions for today. We've already started having really good discussions amongst us, and that was very helpful in the way that you were teasing apart and showing how it's distinct, what's happening with the Guam product seal, and then the intellectual property rights that we're talking about for our work. So with that, if there isn't any more discussion at this point, can I have somebody make a motion to adjourn? Unless somebody wants to have a little more discussion first.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
Sijuas Maasi, everyone, for your attendance today. I look forward to, as I mentioned, many more meetings, but us making some real progress and amongst us, but also helping the community at large think about these really important issues. So with this, the motion carries to adjourn this Guam Trademark Commission meeting. The time is now 11:14. Sijuas Maasi, everyone, again, for your attendance and participation in today's Guam Trademark Commission meeting.